The blood on her wedding dress had long since dried to a rust-brown stain, but Adelaide Harper still wore it as she stumbled into Valentine, Nebraska on foot, her silk shoes torn to ribbons and her veil trailing in the dust behind her like a ghost. It was July 1878, and the heat shimmered off the wooden planks of the main street in waves that made the entire town look like it was melting. She had walked 17 miles through the prairie grass, and every step had been a prayer that she would reach civilization before her father's men caught up with her. The first person to notice her was an old woman sweeping the porch of the general store, who took one look at Adelaide's torn dress and bloody knuckles and hurried inside without a word. The second was a child who pointed and stared until his mother yanked him away. The third was Garrett Grayson, who had just stepped out of the livery stable where he worked, wiping his hands on a rag that was already so filthy it probably made them dirtier. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw her, his green eyes widening in surprise. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that needed shaving, and he wore the simple clothes of a working man: worn denim pants, a faded shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and boots that had seen better days. He looked to be in his mid-20s, maybe a year or two older than Adelaide's 22 years. "Madam," he said, his voice rough from disuse, "are you all right?" Adelaide wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the question, but she was afraid that if she started, she might never stop. Instead, she swayed on her feet, and suddenly Garrett was there, catching her before she could fall. "Whoa, easy now," he said, his hands gentle despite their roughness. "When's the last time you ate something?" She couldn't remember. Yesterday, the day before. Time had lost all meaning since she had climbed out of that church window and started running. "I need help," she managed to say, her voice cracking. "Please, they're coming for me." Garrett's expression darkened. "Who's coming for you, my father? My intended, all of them." She clutched at his shirt, her fingers trembling. "You have to understand, I couldn't marry him. I couldn't. He killed his first wife, I know he did, no matter what anyone says. I heard him talking about it when he thought I was asleep. He was proud of it. Proud." She was babbling now, the words spilling out of her like water from a broken dam. Garrett listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When she finally fell silent, he glanced up and down the street, his jaw tight. "Come on," he said, making a decision. "You can't stand out here like this. People are already talking." He led her around the back of the livery stable to a small room that served as both his workshop and living quarters. It was cramped and smelled of leather and horse, but it was clean, and there was a cot in the corner with a blanket that looked like it had been washed recently. "Sit," he ordered, pointing to the cot. Adelaide sank down gratefully, her legs finally giving out. Garrett disappeared for a moment and came back with a tin cup full of water and a hunk of bread wrapped in cloth. "Drink this slow," he said, "and eat that slower. You'll make yourself sick otherwise." Adelaide did as she was told, taking tiny sips of water and smaller bites of bread. The food sat heavy in her stomach, but after a few minutes the world stopped spinning quite so badly. "Thank you," she said quietly. Garrett shrugged, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. "You want to tell me what happened? The real story," so she did. She told him about her father, Augustus Harper, who owned the largest cattle ranch in Wyoming and ruled over it like a king. She told him about Charles Blackthorne, the man her father had chosen for her to marry, who was rich and handsome and charming, and who had murdered his first wife by pushing her down the stairs and making it look like an accident. She told him about overhearing Charles talking to one of his men about how he would inherit her father's ranch through her, and how he would make sure she had an accident too, once she had given him an heir. "I tried to tell my father," she said, her voice breaking, "but he wouldn't listen." He said I was being hysterical, that Charles was a good man and I should be grateful he wanted to marry me. So I tried to run the night before the wedding, but they caught me and locked me in my room. I had to wait until the ceremony itself, and then I climbed out a window and ran. And the blood? Garrett asked, nodding at her dress. I had to fight off one of Charles's men, she said. He tried to stop me. I hit him with a candelabra and I think I broke his nose. There was so much blood. Garrett's mouth twitched. Good for you. Adelaide looked up at him in surprise. You believe me? Why wouldn't I? My father didn't. No one else did either. They all thought I was being foolish. They said Charles was a good man and I should trust him. I've met a lot of men who seem good on the surface, Garrett said quietly. Some of the worst monsters I've known were the kind who smiled real pretty and said all the right things. A woman's got to trust her instincts about these things. Something in Adelaide's chest loosened at his words. A knot she hadn't even known was there. For the first time since she had started running, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she was going to be all right. They'll come looking for me, she said. My father won't let this go. And Charles, he'll want revenge for the humiliation. Garrett was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. How far behind you do you think they are? I got a head start because everyone was confused, and I took one of the horses from the stable. But I had to let it go when it went lame about 5 miles out. I've been walking since dawn. She glanced at the window where the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. They could be here by tomorrow, maybe sooner if they rode hard. Then we don't have much time. Garrett pushed off the wall and started gathering supplies, moving with quick efficiency. You can't stay here. They'll find you for sure. Valentine's too small to hide in and people will talk. Where can I go? Adelaide asked, despair creeping into her voice. I have no money, no friends, nowhere to run. You've got me, Garrett said, and the simple certainty in his voice made her throat tight. I'm not going to let them drag you back to that. You don't even know me, she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. I know enough, he said. I know you were brave enough to run when it mattered. I know you'd rather face the wilderness alone than marry a man you knew would hurt you. That's enough for me. Adelaide felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough in the past 2 days. What do? We leave, Garrett said. Tonight. I've got a good horse and enough supplies to get us a few days out. We can head west, deeper into Nebraska. There are towns out there where no one will know you, places where we can figure out what to do next. You would do that for me. Leave your job, your life, everything. Garrett's laugh was short and bitter. My job is mucking out stalls and fixing tack for pennies a day. My life is this room and not much else. I've got no family, no ties. I've been thinking about moving on for a while now anyway. This just gives me a reason to do it sooner rather than later. Adelaide stood up, steadying herself on the wall. She looked at this stranger who was offering her everything with no expectation of return, and she made a decision. All right, she said. Let's go. They left Valentine just after midnight when the town was dark and silent. Garrett had a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, who took their combined weight without complaint. Adelaide sat in front of him in the saddle, her ruined wedding dress tucked up around her knees, Garrett's arms on either side of her as he held the reins. She could feel the warmth of his chest against her back, the steady rhythm of his breathing, and it was strangely comforting. They rode through the night, following the North Platte River west. Garrett seemed to know the land well, guiding Rusty along paths that avoided the main roads. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they were miles from Valentine, surrounded by nothing but prairie grass and the occasional stand of cottonwood trees. They stopped to rest when the sun was high, finding a spot near the river where Rusty could drink and graze. Adelaide's whole body ached from the ride, muscles she hadn't known she had screaming in protest. She slid down from the horse with a groan and nearly collapsed. Garrett caught her again, his hands steady on her waist. "Easy," he said. "You'll get used to it." "Will I?" Adelaide asked, doubtful. "You will," he promised. "Here, sit down. I'll get a fire going and we can have something to eat." Adelaide sank down onto the grass, watching as Garrett moved around their makeshift camp with practiced ease. He gathered wood, started a fire with flint and steel, and soon had coffee brewing in a battered tin pot. He also produced some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags, which Adelaide ate without complaint, despite how tough and tasteless it was. "Tell me about yourself," she said after a while when the silence had stretched too long. "Where are you from?" Garrett was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Missouri originally. Little town you've probably never heard of. My parents died when I was 15. Fever took them both in the same week. I didn't have any other family, so I started drifting. Worked whatever jobs I could find. Ended up in Valentine about 6 months ago and stayed because the work was steady and the people left me alone mostly." "I'm sorry," Adelaide said softly. "About your parents," he shrugged. "It was a long time ago. I've made my peace with it. Do you ever think about settling down? Having a home, sometimes," he admitted, "but I'm not sure I'd know what to do with one if I had it. I've been moving for so long. I don't know if I remember how to stay still." Adelaide understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. She had lived her whole life in her father's house, subject to his rules and his will, and in many ways she had been moving too, just in place. Running from a life she didn't want, trying to find one she did. "What about you?" Garrett asked. "What did you want to do with your life before all this?" No one had ever asked her that before. Adelaide had to think about it. "I wanted to paint," she said finally. "I used to love painting when I was younger. Landscapes mostly. There's something about capturing the way light falls on things, the way colors change depending on the time of day. My father said it was a waste of time, that I should focus on being a good wife instead. So I stopped." "That's a shame," Garrett said. "You should start again." "Maybe," Adelaide said, though she couldn't imagine when or how. She had no supplies, no money for them, and more pressing concerns than art. They rested for a few hours and then rode on, covering as much ground as they could before dark. That night they camped under the stars, and Adelaide lay on her bedroll looking up at the vast expanse of sky, feeling small and lost and strangely free all at once. "Are you scared?" Garrett asked from where he lay a few feet away, his voice quiet in the darkness. "Yes," Adelaide admitted. "But less than I was before." "Good," he said. "Fear's useful, keeps you sharp, but don't let it control you." "Is that what you do?" "I try," he said. "Doesn't always work, but I try." Adelaide turned her head to look at him, but in the darkness she could only make out the shape of him, the outline of his profile against the stars. "Thank you," she said, "for helping me. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. You didn't have to do any of this." "Yeah, I did," Garrett said. "I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd let them take you back." Something warm unfurled in Adelaide's chest at his words, something she was afraid to name. She turned her gaze back to the stars and tried to ignore it. They traveled for 3 more days, moving steadily west. Garrett was careful to avoid towns and settlements, though they did stop at a remote farmhouse to trade some of his tools for food and supplies. The farmer's wife took one look at Adelaide's ruined dress and offered her a simple cotton skirt and blouse, which Adelaide accepted gratefully. It felt good to finally be out of the wedding dress, like she was shedding a skin that had never fit right. On the 4th day, they reached a town called Ogallala, a rough place that had sprung up around the railroad. It was bigger than Valentine, full of cowboys and railroad workers and all the businesses that served them. Saloons lined the main street, along with a hotel, a general store, and a small church with a white steeple. "We should stop here for a few days," Garrett said as they rode in. "Let Rusty rest, maybe pick up some work and earn enough for better supplies." Adelaide nodded, though the thought of staying anywhere for long made her nervous. "Do you think it's safe?" "Safe as anywhere," Garrett said. "We're far enough from Wyoming that I doubt anyone here will have heard about a runaway bride. And even if they have, you look different enough now that they probably wouldn't recognize you." It was true. The fine lady who had fled her wedding was gone, replaced by a woman in simple homespun clothes with wind-burned cheeks and tangled hair. Adelaide barely recognized herself when she caught sight of her reflection in a shop window. They got a room at the hotel, and the clerk didn't even blink when Garrett signed them in as Mr. and Mrs. Grayson. Adelaide felt a flutter in her stomach at the lie, but she didn't correct it. It was safer this way, and besides, unmarried women traveling alone with men were subject to all kinds of assumptions and treatment she would rather avoid. The room was small but clean, with a single bed and a washstand. Garrett took one look at it and said, "I'll sleep on the floor." "You don't have to do that," Adelaide protested. "The bed's big enough for two if we're careful." "It wouldn't be proper," Garrett said, his ears turning red. Adelaide laughed, the sound surprising both of them. It was the first time she had laughed in what felt like years. "Garrett, we've been sleeping under the stars together for days. I think propriety sailed away a long time ago." "That's different," he muttered. "That was necessity. This is choice. And I'm choosing to offer you half the bed so you don't wake up with a sore back," Adelaide said firmly. "Please. You've done so much for me already. At least let me do this for you." Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. "All right, but I'm sleeping on top of the covers." "Fine," Adelaide said, and tried to ignore the way her heart was beating faster. That night, they lay side by side in the darkness, carefully not touching. Adelaide could hear Garrett breathing, slow and steady, and she wondered if he was asleep or just pretending. She stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about how aware she was of him, of every shift and movement he made. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Sure," Garrett replied, his voice alert, so he hadn't been sleeping either. "Why did you really help me? The truth this time." Garrett was silent for a long moment. "When I was 16, he said finally, "I met a girl in the town where I was working. Her name was Mary. She was sweet and kind, and she laughed at my jokes even when they weren't funny. We were going to get married, save up enough money to buy a little farm somewhere. But her father had other ideas. He'd promised her to a man twice her age, someone with money and influence. Mary tried to run like you did, but she didn't make it. He caught her and dragged her back and married her off anyway." He paused. "She died 6 months later. Her husband said it was an accident that she fell, but I always wondered." Adelaide's throat was tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I couldn't help her," Garrett said, his voice rough with old pain. "I was just a kid with nothing to my name. I had no power, no way to stop it. But when I saw you standing there in that dress, looking like you'd fought your way out of hell itself, I knew I wasn't going to let the same thing happen again. Not if I could help it." Adelaide reached out in the darkness and found his hand. His fingers were rough and calloused, but they closed around hers gently. "She was lucky to have someone who cared about her that much," she said. "Even if you couldn't save her, at least she knew she was loved." "Maybe," Garrett said. "I hope so." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped together in the darkness, and when Adelaide woke in the morning, she found that sometime in the night they had moved closer together, until her head was resting on his shoulder and his arm was around her waist. She knew she should move, should put proper distance between them, but she didn't want to. For the first time in longer than she could remember, She felt safe. Garrett stirred and opened his eyes, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Then he cleared his throat and sat up, carefully extracting himself from their tangle. "I should go see about work," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You should stay here, rest. It's safer." Adelaide wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She nodded and watched him go, feeling oddly bereft. Garrett came back that afternoon with good news. He had found work at one of the local ranches, helping to break horses. It was hard, dangerous work, but it paid well. "They said they could use me for at least a week, maybe 2, he told Adelaide. "That'll give us enough money to buy better supplies and keep moving." "Where will we go?" Adelaide asked. "I've been thinking about that," Garrett said. "There's mining towns up in the Black Hills in Dakota Territory. Gold Rush brought a lot of people up there, and it's far enough from Wyoming that your father's reach won't extend that far. We could disappear there, start fresh." "And do what?" "Whatever we need to," Garrett said. "I can work. You could too if you wanted." "I know it's not the life you were raised for, but I don't want the life I was raised for," Adelaide interrupted. "I want something real, something that's mine." Garrett smiled at that, a real smile that lit up his whole face and made him look younger. "Then we'll make that happen," he said. "I promise." Over the next week, they fell into a routine. Garrett would leave early in the morning to work at the ranch, and Adelaide would stay in the hotel room or walk around town, being careful to keep her head down and avoid attention. In the evenings, they would have dinner together at a small restaurant near the hotel, and then they would return to their room and talk until late into the night. Adelaide learned more about Garrett during those conversations. She learned that he loved to read, though he rarely had access to books. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on her when she least expected it. She learned that he was kind and patient and thoughtful, and that he listened when she talked, really listened, like what she had to say mattered. And Garrett learned about her too. He learned about her childhood, about the mother she had lost when she was 10. He learned about her love of art and music and books, all the things her father had dismissed as frivolous. He learned about her dreams, the ones she had buried so deep she had almost forgotten they existed. "You should paint again," he said one night as they lay in bed, the space between them growing smaller with each passing day. "When we get settled somewhere, I'd like to see what you create." "I'm probably terrible at it now," Adelaide said. "It's been years." "So you'll practice," Garrett said. "Skills come back, and even if they don't, even if you're terrible, at least you'll be doing something you love." Adelaide turned to look at him, so close now that she could count the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "How did you get to be so wise?" "I'm not wise," Garrett said. "I've just spent a lot of time alone with my thoughts. You learn things that way." "Like what?" "Like life's too short to spend it doing things that make you miserable," he said. "Like the only person who gets to decide what your life looks like is you. Like sometimes the bravest thing you can do is reach for what you want, even if it scares you." Adelaide's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "And what do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Garrett reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "I think you know," he said. She did know. She had known for days now, maybe longer. She had felt it in the way he looked at her, in the gentleness of his touch, in the way he always made sure she was comfortable and safe. And she knew what she felt too, this growing warmth in her chest every time she saw him, this sense of rightness when they were together. "Garrett," she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and tentative, and asking a question she answered by kissing him back. It was nothing like the kiss Charles had forced on her after their engagement, all teeth and possession and demand. This was gentle, exploratory, a conversation in a language she was just learning to speak. Garrett's hand cupped her face like she was something precious, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that for days," Garrett admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "Then why didn't you?" "Because I didn't want you to think I expected anything," he said. "You've been through so much, and I didn't want to take advantage." Adelaide's heart swelled with affection for this man who had saved her and asked for nothing in return. "You could never take advantage of me," she said. "Garrett, you've given me everything. Freedom, safety, hope. You've treated me with more respect and kindness than anyone ever has. I care about you, more than I probably should, given how little time we've known each other." "Time doesn't matter," Garrett said. "I knew the first moment I saw you that you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how much." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Adelaide felt something inside her come alive. Some part of herself she had locked away for so long she had forgotten it existed. When they finally fell asleep, they were wrapped in each other's arms, and Adelaide dreamed of open skies and endless possibilities. The next morning, everything changed. Adelaide woke to the sound of raised voices from the street below. She sat up, instantly alert, and saw that Garrett was already at the window peering out through the curtains. "What is it?" she asked, fear making her voice sharp. "Men," Garrett said grimly. "4 of them, asking questions, showing something around, looks like a photograph or a drawing." Adelaide's blood ran cold. "They found us." "Not yet," Garrett said. He turned to her, his expression fierce. "Get dressed. We need to leave. Now." They threw their meager belongings together in minutes, moving with frantic efficiency. Garrett went to get Rusty from the livery while Adelaide waited in the room, her heart pounding. Every sound from the hallway made her jump, convinced it was them coming for her. But Garrett returned before anyone found her, and they slipped out the back of the hotel and made their way to where Rusty was waiting. They were just about to mount up when a voice called out behind them, "Hold it right there." Adelaide turned and saw one of the men from the street, a tall figure with a badge pinned to his vest. A lawman. Her stomach dropped. "We haven't done anything wrong," Garrett said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "That's not what I hear," the lawman said. "I hear you've got a young lady with you who ran away from her wedding. Her father's real worried about her. He's offering a reward for her safe return." "I'm not going back," Adelaide said, stepping forward. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to keep talking. "That man he wants me to marry, he's dangerous. He killed his first wife, and he'll kill me too." The lawman's expression didn't change. "That's a serious accusation, madam. You got any proof?" "I heard him confess to it." "But you don't have proof," the lawman said. "And running away from your legal guardian and betrothed, that's a crime. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me." "No," Garrett said, stepping between Adelaide and the lawman. "She's not going anywhere." "Son, I don't want trouble," the lawman said, his hand moving to his gun. "But I'll take her by force if I have to." "You'll have to go through me first," Garrett said. For a long, tense moment they stared at each other. Adelaide could barely breathe. Then a new voice spoke up. "I don't think that'll be necessary, Tom." Everyone turned to see a woman standing in the doorway of the general store. She was older, maybe in her 50s, with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. Adelaide recognized her as the woman who ran the store, someone she had seen around town but never spoken to. "This isn't your business, Martha," the lawman said. "I'm making it my business," Martha replied. "I've heard about that girl's father and the man she was supposed to marry. Word travels even out here. And I heard what happened to Charles Blackthorne's first wife. People talk, Tom. People know things." "That's just gossip," the lawman said. "Maybe," Martha said. "But seems to me that if a woman is willing to run away from her own wedding and cross half the territory on foot, she's got a good reason." and seems to me that a man willing to offer a reward for dragging her back might not have her best interests at heart. The law says she has to go back, the lawman insisted, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. The law says a lot of things, Martha said. But justice and law aren't always the same thing, are they? Now, I'm a respected businesswoman in this town, and I'm telling you that this girl stays. She's done nothing wrong that I can see. Other people were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. A few other women joined Martha, forming a wall of skirts and determination. Adelaide stared at them in shock, these strangers who were standing up for her. The lawman looked around, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he held up his hands. "All right," he said. "Have it your way. But I'm going to have to wire her father and tell him where she is. What happens after that is on your heads." "Fair enough," Martha said. "You do what you need to do, Tom. We'll do the same." The lawman walked away, shaking his head. As soon as he was gone, Adelaide's legs gave out and she sat down hard on the ground. Garrett was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "It's all right," he said. "We're all right." But Adelaide knew they weren't. Her father would come for her or send men who would. They couldn't stay in Ogallala. They couldn't stay anywhere in Nebraska. Martha walked over and looked down at them with kind eyes. "You two should leave town," she said. "Tonight if you can. Head north into Dakota Territory. Get as far away as possible." "Thank you," Adelaide managed to say. "For what you did. You didn't have to help us." "Yes, I did," Martha said simply. "I was in a bad marriage once, long time ago. Took me years to get out of it. I'm not going to stand by and watch another woman get forced into the same situation if I can help it." She reached into her apron and pulled out a small pouch. "Here, it's not much, but it should help you get where you're going." Adelaide opened the pouch and found money inside, more than she had expected. "I can't take this," she protested. "You can and you will," Martha said firmly. "Consider it an investment in your future. Now go on, get moving. You don't have much time." They left Ogallala that night as soon as darkness fell. Garrett pushed Rusty hard and the horse responded, carrying them north across the open prairie. Adelaide held onto Garrett tightly, her face pressed against his back, and tried not to think about what would happen if they were caught. They rode for 2 days straight, stopping only to rest the horse and grab a few hours of sleep. On the 3rd day, they crossed into Dakota Territory, and Garrett finally allowed them to slow down. "We should be safe now," he said, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. "Your father's influence won't reach this far, and the law in Dakota won't care about what happened in Wyoming." "What do we do now?" Adelaide asked. She was exhausted, dirty, and scared, but underneath all of that was a strange sense of exhilaration. They had made it. Against all odds, they had escaped. "We find somewhere to settle," Garrett said. "Somewhere we can build a life." They ended up in Deadwood, a rough mining town in the Black Hills that was bursting at the seams with prospectors and merchants, and all the people who fed off the gold rush. It was chaotic and dirty and wonderful, a place where no one cared who you were or where you came from as long as you could pay your way. Garrett found work as a farrier, shoeing horses for the miners and the freight companies that ran supplies into the hills. It was good work, steady work, and he was skilled enough that people sought him out. Adelaide took in mending and laundry, using the skills she had learned as a girl. It wasn't glamorous, but it brought in money, and for the first time in her life she was earning her own keep. They rented a small cabin on the edge of town, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. Adelaide made curtains for the windows and planted a small garden out front. Garrett built her a table where she could work and surprised her one day with a set of watercolors he had bought from a traveling salesman. "You said you wanted to paint," he told her, looking pleased with himself. "So paint." Adelaide threw her arms around him and kissed him right there in the middle of the street, not caring who saw. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. Garrett's face broke into a huge grin. "I love you too," he said. "Have for a while now, if I'm being honest." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Didn't want to presume," he said. "Figured you'd tell me when you were ready." They were happy in Deadwood, or as happy as they could be living in sin and looking over their shoulders for trouble that never came. Months passed, and Adelaide started to relax, to believe that maybe they had truly escaped. She painted in the evenings, capturing the wild beauty of the Black Hills on paper, and Garrett would watch her work with a soft expression that made her heart ache. But there was one problem that neither of them could quite figure out how to solve. They wanted to get married, to make their relationship legal and proper, but there was no way to do it without drawing attention to themselves. Adelaide was technically still betrothed to Charles Blackthorne, and any marriage to Garrett would be contested. Beyond that, they would need papers, documents that would have to be filed and recorded, and that would create a trail that could lead her father right to them. "We could just keep going the way we are," Adelaide suggested one night as they lay in bed. "Does it really matter if we're married legally? We know what we mean to each other." "It matters to me," Garrett said. "I want you to be my wife properly. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours. I want to stand up in front of God and everyone and say vows that mean something." "But no preacher will marry us," Adelaide said. "Not without papers, not without questions." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat up, his expression determined. "Then we'll do it ourselves," he said. "What do you mean?" "I mean we'll speak our vows before God ourselves," Garrett said. "We don't need a preacher to make it real. We just need each other and our promises. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Two people committing to each other." Adelaide sat up too, her heart pounding. "You really mean that?" "I do," Garrett said. "Adelaide, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night for the rest of my life. I don't care if it's legal in the eyes of the law. I care that it's real in the eyes of God." Tears were streaming down Adelaide's face now, but she was smiling. "When?" she asked. "How about Sunday?" Garrett said. "We can ride up into the hills, find a nice spot, and make our promises to each other. Just the two of us and God." Sunday dawned clear and bright, one of those perfect autumn days that felt like a gift. Garrett and Adelaide rode Rusty up into the hills, following a trail that wound through ponderosa pines and past rushing streams. They found a meadow near the top of a ridge, surrounded by trees and overlooking a valley that stretched out as far as the eye could see. "This is perfect," Adelaide breathed. They dismounted and Garrett helped her down. Adelaide had made herself a simple dress from white cotton, nothing fancy but clean and new. Garrett wore his best shirt and had even trimmed his hair and shaved. They stood facing each other in the meadow, the sun warm on their faces, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Garrett took her hands in his. "I'm not good with fancy words," he said, "so I'm just going to speak from my heart. Adelaide, you came into my life when I least expected it, and you turned everything upside down. You made me want things I thought I'd never have. A home. A future. Someone to share it all with. I promise to love you and protect you and stand by you for the rest of my life. I promise to be faithful and true, to work hard and provide for you, to listen when you speak and hold you when you cry. I promise to be your partner in all things, to respect your dreams and help you chase them. I promise to love you every day in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live." Adelaide was crying openly now, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I promise to love you with everything I am," she said, her voice shaking. "You saved my life, Garrett, in more ways than one. You gave me freedom and hope, and a future I never thought I could have. I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to be faithful and true, to build a home with you, to support your dreams the way you've supported mine. I promise to love you fiercely and completely, to be your partner and your friend, to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. Garrett pulled her close and kissed her, deep and tender and full of promise. When they broke apart, both of them were crying. I wish I had a ring for you, Garrett said, something to mark this. We don't need rings, Adelaide said. We have each other. That's enough. But Garrett was already pulling something from his pocket. It was a simple band he had forged himself from a piece of iron, shaped and polished until it gleamed. It's not much, he said. Not gold or anything fancy, but I made it with my own hands and it's made to last. Adelaide held out her hand, trembling, and Garrett slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It's beautiful, she whispered. It's perfect. They stayed in the meadow for hours, talking and laughing and planning their future. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they rode back down the mountain, husband and wife in the eyes of God if not the law. Life in Deadwood continued, but everything felt different now. Adelaide wore her iron ring with pride, and when people asked about it, she said simply, "I'm married." She didn't elaborate, and no one pressed her for details. In a town full of people running from something, discretion was valued. Winter came, cold and harsh, and Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complicated mix of joy and fear. She wanted this child desperately, wanted to build a family with Garrett, but she was terrified of childbirth, of all the things that could go wrong. "We'll get through it together," Garrett promised when she told him. "I'll take care of you, both of you." And he did. He worked extra hours to save money for a doctor. He made sure Adelaide had enough to eat, that she stayed warm and rested. He built a cradle for the baby with his own hands, carving it from pine and sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Adelaide painted through her pregnancy, capturing the changing seasons in watercolor. She painted the meadow where they had married. She painted Rusty grazing in the field behind their cabin. She painted Garrett at his forge, muscles straining as he shaped hot iron, his face fierce with concentration. She painted their small cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a light glowing warm in the window. One painting she kept secret from Garrett until it was finished. It showed the two of them standing in the meadow, hands clasped, the sun setting behind them. At the bottom, she wrote in careful script, June 15, 1879, the day Garrett Grayson and Adelaide Harper spoke their vows before God. When she showed it to him, Garrett stared at it for a long time without speaking. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "It's us," he said, his voice rough. "You captured us." "I wanted to remember," Adelaide said. "I wanted to have proof that this happened, that it was real." "It's real," Garrett assured her. "More real than anything I've ever known." Their son was born in early spring on a day when the first flowers were pushing up through the last of the snow. The birth was hard, long hours of pain that left Adelaide exhausted and scared, but in the end, she heard her baby's first cry and felt him placed in her arms, and none of it mattered. "He's perfect," she breathed, looking down at the tiny red face. "What should we name him?" Garrett asked, peering over her shoulder in wonder. They had discussed names for weeks, but now that the moment was here, Adelaide knew exactly what she wanted. "Thomas," she said, "after your father." Garrett's eyes went bright with unshed tears. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Adelaide said. "Your parents should be remembered. They made you who you are." So Thomas Grayson he became, and he was the light of their lives. Garrett was a devoted father, patient and gentle despite his rough exterior. He would come home from work covered in soot and sweat, and the first thing he would do was wash up and hold his son, singing to him in a low, off-key voice that made Adelaide smile. They were happy, truly happy, but the shadow of Adelaide's past still hung over them. She worried constantly that someone would recognize her, that word would reach her father, that everything they had built would come crashing down. Then, when Thomas was 6 months old, it almost did. A man came through Deadwood, a traveling merchant who had done business with Adelaide's father. He saw Adelaide in the general store and his eyes widened in recognition. "Adelaide Harper," he said, loud enough for half the store to hear. "Is that you?" Adelaide's blood turned to ice. She wanted to run, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm sorry," she said. "You must have me confused with someone else. My name is Adelaide Grayson." "No, I'm sure it's you," the merchant insisted. "You're Augustus Harper's daughter. I'd know you anywhere. Does your father know you're here?" "Last I heard, you had run off from your wedding and he was tearing the territory apart looking for you." Every eye in the store was on Adelaide now. She lifted her chin and met the merchant's gaze steadily. "I don't know who you think I am," she said, "but you're mistaken. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get home to my husband and son." She walked out of the store with her head high, but as soon as she was around the corner, she ran. She had to get to Garrett. They had to leave, had to run again. But when she burst into the forge, wild-eyed and panicking, Garrett took one look at her and set down his tools. "Tell me," he said. She did, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. Garrett listened, his expression growing grimmer with each word. "We can leave," he said when she was done. "Pack up tonight and be gone by morning. We've done it before." "And go where?" Adelaide asked desperately. "How far do we have to run before we're safe? How many times do we have to start over?" "As many as it takes," Garrett said. "I'm not going to let them take you away from me. I don't care if we have to spend the rest of our lives running." But even as he said it, Adelaide could see the weariness in his eyes. They were both tired of running, tired of looking over their shoulders. They had built a life here. They had friends, work they enjoyed, a home. Thomas was thriving. The thought of tearing it all down and starting over somewhere new made her want to weep. "There has to be another way," she said. Before Garrett could answer, there was a knock at the door. They both froze. Adelaide grabbed Thomas from his cradle and held him close, her heart hammering. Garrett opened the door slowly, his body blocking the entrance. "Can I help you? Are you Garrett Grayson?" The voice was male, older, with an accent Adelaide didn't recognize. "Depends on who's asking." "My name is Samuel Frost. I'm a lawyer from Cheyenne. I need to speak with you and your wife about a delicate matter." Adelaide's stomach dropped. A lawyer. Her father had sent a lawyer to force her to come home, but Garrett didn't back down. "My wife and I aren't interested in whatever you're selling." "I'm not selling anything," the lawyer said. "I'm here about Augustus Harper's estate." "What about it?" Garrett asked warily. "He's dead," the lawyer said simply. "Died 3 weeks ago of a heart attack. I've been searching for his daughter to notify her." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Adelaide sat down hard, clutching Thomas so tight he started to fuss. Her father was dead. The man who had controlled her entire life, who had tried to force her into a marriage that would have killed her, was gone. "May I come in?" the lawyer asked gently. "I promise I mean you no harm. I just need to discuss some legal matters with Mrs. Grayson." Garrett looked back at Adelaide, a question in his eyes. She nodded slowly, still trying to process what she had just heard. Her father was dead. Samuel Frost was a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and a patient manner. He sat down at their small table and pulled out a sheaf of papers. "First, let me say that I'm sorry for your loss," he said to Adelaide. "I'm not," Adelaide heard herself say. He was a terrible man who tried to force me into a marriage with a murderer. I ran away to save my life." The lawyer didn't look surprised. "Yes, I gathered as much from the investigation. You see, after Mr. Harper died, his affairs were looked into rather thoroughly. Charles Blackthorne is currently awaiting trial for the murder of his first wife. Evidence was discovered that corroborated what you apparently told your father on the day of your wedding. He did indeed kill her, and he was planning to do the same to you once he had secured your inheritance." Adelaide felt like she might be sick. "My father knew." "No," the lawyer said. "At least, I don't believe so. The evidence suggests he genuinely believed Blackthorne was a good match. He was wrong, obviously, but I don't think he was complicit in the murder plot. It was small comfort, but it was something. Her father had been controlling and dismissive, but at least he hadn't knowingly tried to have her killed." "What does this have to do with us?" Garrett asked, his hand on Adelaide's shoulder. "Everything," the lawyer said. "You see, Mr. Harper's will left everything to his daughter. The ranch, the cattle, all of his assets. It's a considerable fortune, but there's a problem." "Let me guess," Adelaide said bitterly. "I can't inherit because I'm not married according to the law." "Actually, that's not the problem," the lawyer said. "Wyoming territory recognizes common law marriage. If you've been living as husband and wife for a significant period, presenting yourselves as married, then in the eyes of the law, you are married. The problem is that I need to verify your identity and your marriage to properly execute the will." Adelaide and Garrett looked at each other. "We got married last June," Adelaide said slowly. "We spoke our own vows because no preacher would wed us. We've been living as husband and wife ever since. We have a son." The lawyer nodded, making notes. "That should be sufficient for common law marriage. I'll need some witnesses who can testify that you've been living as a married couple. Do you have anyone who can do that?" "Half the town," Garrett said. "Everyone knows us as Mr. and Mrs. Grayson." "Excellent," the lawyer said. "Then there shouldn't be any problem with you inheriting. However, I should warn you that this will become public knowledge. People will know where you are, who you are. If that's a problem, it's not," Adelaide said, surprising herself. "I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding. This is my life, my family. If people have a problem with how we chose to get married, that's their concern, not mine." The lawyer smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. You know, I've handled a lot of estates in my time, but this is the first time I've felt good about it. Your father may not have been a good man, but at least his wealth is going to someone who deserves it." It took several weeks to sort out all the legalities, but in the end, Adelaide inherited everything. The ranch was sold, as she had no desire to return to Wyoming or to ranching. The money from the sale, combined with her father's other assets, made her and Garrett wealthy beyond their wildest dreams. "We could go anywhere," Garrett said as they looked at the bank draft the lawyer had given them. "Do anything. What do you want to do?" Adelaide looked around their small cabin, at the cradle where Thomas was sleeping, at the watercolor paintings she had tacked to the walls, at the life they had built together from nothing. "I want to stay here," she said. "This is our home, but I want to make it better. I want to buy some land, build a real house, maybe start a business, something of our own. And I want to help people like Martha helped us, women who are running, who need a safe place. We could make a difference." Garrett's smile was slow and warm. "That sounds perfect," he said. So they stayed in Deadwood. They bought a piece of land on the edge of town and built a large, sturdy house with room to grow. Garrett expanded his forge business, hiring help so he didn't have to work such long hours. Adelaide started painting seriously, selling her watercolors to the new hotels and saloons that were springing up as Deadwood became more civilized. Her paintings of the Black Hills became popular with tourists, and she found she could command good prices for her work. But their most important project was the house they set up for women in trouble. It started small, just a few rooms where women could stay if they needed to escape bad situations. Adelaide funded it entirely herself, and she and Garrett became known as people who would help, no questions asked. Over the years, they helped dozens of women find their feet, find safety, find new lives. Thomas grew into a bright, curious boy who loved horses as much as his father did. When he was 4, Adelaide gave birth to twin girls, Mary and Martha, named for the women who had helped them along the way. 2 years after that, another son arrived, Samuel, named for the lawyer who had helped make their new life possible. They lived in Deadwood for the rest of their lives, watching the wild mining town slowly transform into something more permanent. They made friends, became pillars of the community, and never once regretted the choice they had made to speak their vows before God rather than waiting for the approval of men. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Garrett surprised Adelaide by arranging for a preacher to marry them officially in the small church that had been built in town. It was a beautiful ceremony, attended by half of Deadwood, and when the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was absolute. "I know we're already married," Garrett said afterward as they stood on the church steps, surrounded by well-wishers. "But I wanted to do it right this time. I wanted everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours, legal and proper." Adelaide kissed him in front of everyone, not caring about propriety. "I was always yours," she said, "from the moment you caught me in Valentine and didn't let me fall." "You saved me, Garrett Grayson." "No," Garrett said, pulling her close. "We saved each other." Years passed, marked by the changing seasons and the growing of their children. Thomas became a farrier like his father, taking over the business when Garrett's back got too stiff for the work. Mary became a teacher, running the small school in Deadwood. Martha surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, inspired by Samuel Frost's kindness all those years ago. Young Samuel took after his mother, becoming an artist whose paintings of the West were exhibited in galleries back east. Adelaide and Garrett grew old together, their hair going gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love never dimmed. They would sit on the porch of their house in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and purple, and talk about their life together. "You ever regret it?" Adelaide asked one evening when they were in their 60s. "Running away with me, giving up your life in Valentine." "Not for a single second," Garrett said, taking her hand. The iron ring he had made her still circled her finger, worn smooth by decades of wear. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we built. I wouldn't trade it for anything." "I love you," Adelaide said, the words as true as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Garrett replied. "Always have, always will." They lived to see their grandchildren born, a whole new generation of Graysons who filled their house with noise and laughter. They lived to see Deadwood become a proper city, with electric lights and telephones, and all the modern conveniences they had never imagined when they first arrived. Garrett died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Adelaide holding his hand. She mourned him deeply, but found comfort in knowing that they had lived a full life together, that they had loved each other fiercely and completely until the very end. Adelaide lived for 5 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She painted until her hands grew too shaky to hold a brush, capturing the beauty of the land she had come to love. Her last painting was of the meadow where she and Garrett had married, as vibrant and alive as she remembered it. She died in the spring, when the flowers were blooming and the world was coming back to life. Her children buried her next to Garrett on a hill overlooking Deadwood, with a simple stone that read, "Adelaide Harper Grayson, beloved wife, mother, and friend, She chose her own path. At the funeral, Thomas stood with his siblings and told the story of how their parents had met, how they had run away together and built a life from nothing. He told how they had spoken their vows before God when no preacher would marry them, and how they had loved each other with a devotion that inspired everyone who knew them. "They taught us that love is a choice," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That you can choose to be brave, choose to be kind, choose to build something beautiful even when the world tries to tear you down. They chose each other every single day, and they never regretted it. That's the legacy they left us." In the years that followed, the story of Garrett and Adelaide Grayson became part of Deadwood's history, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. People spoke of the cowboy who saved a runaway bride, of the couple who married themselves when no one else would help them, of the love that lasted a lifetime and changed a community. The house they had built for women in need continued to operate for decades, funded by the money Adelaide had left for that purpose. Hundreds of women found safety there, found the courage to start over, found hope when they thought all was lost. On the wall of the main room hung Adelaide's painting of her wedding day, a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose your own happiness, no matter what anyone else says. And in a small museum in Deadwood, visitors can still see the watercolors Adelaide painted, vibrant glimpses of the Old West preserved in paper and paint. The most popular is the one of the meadow, with its note at the bottom. June 15, 1879. The day Garrett Grayson and Adelaide Harper spoke their vows before God. It serves as a reminder that love doesn't need approval to be real, that commitment doesn't need a piece of paper to be binding, and that sometimes the most beautiful marriages are the ones we make ourselves, with nothing but two hearts and the courage to choose each other against all odds. The story of Garrett and Adelaide lived on through their descendants, each generation adding their own chapters to the family history. Their great-grandchildren would gather on holidays and listen to the tale of how their ancestors had defied convention and expectation to build a life together. Young couples facing opposition to their relationships would visit the graves on the hill and draw strength from the knowledge that true love, chosen freely and defended fiercely, could overcome any obstacle. In the end, Adelaide and Garrett's greatest legacy wasn't the money they left behind or the businesses they built or even the refuge they created for women in need. It was the simple, radical act of loving each other completely, of choosing partnership over propriety, of speaking their vows before God and meaning every word. They proved that sometimes the most sacred ceremonies are the ones we create ourselves, and that the truest marriages are built not on documents and witnesses, but on trust and devotion, and the daily choice to stand together against whatever comes. Their love story became a testament to courage, to hope, to the transformative power of choosing your own destiny. And though they were gone, their legacy lived on in every couple who found the strength to follow their hearts, in every person who chose authenticity over approval, in every life built on the foundation of freely given love. Garrett and Adelaide Grayson had shown that when the world says no, when society turns its back, when no preacher will wed you, sometimes the bravest and most beautiful thing you can do is stand up, take your beloved's hand, and speak your vows before God yourself. And in doing so, create something far more powerful than any legal document could ever be. A marriage built on love, tested by adversity, and strong enough to last not just a lifetime, but for generations to come.